Ladies, they keep tripping me up on that. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the What's in My Head Picks Ed and Eddy. And what are the kind of crazy shit that's going to come and pop up in here? Who knows what's going to happen? It's going to be fun. Rachel, how the hell are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me on, Julian.
Oh, man, thank you. So I usually like to open up the podcast with something similar each time. When did you realize that writing was something that you absolutely loved?
You know, when they always go, what do you want to be when you grow up? For me, it was like, I don't know specifically what I want to be, but it's either going to be doing something with writing, working in like maybe some kind of like charity situation, like helping people, or working with animals. So they were my three kind of guides as for what I was going to do when I was older. I volunteered at like farms and things when I was a kid, and I basically worked out that I don't have the stomach for like the ugly side of looking after animals, like, you know, if you become a vet or something. So I was left with the other two choices really. But yeah, I was writing stories a lot when I was a kid. When I was staying at my nan and granddad's, they had like 3 Scottish terriers, and I used to make up adventures and stories about them, which is kind of ironic considering what I went to go on and do with Ed and Eddy. Yeah, so it was just something. I was a very shy kid, so like being able to write was a way I could kind of express myself and what was going on and that. So yeah, for as long as I can remember, really.
Now, when you started, when was the last time you looked at any story that you've written? Have you saved much of what you used to write, or did it all go in the trash?
I don't have my Ed and Eddy scripts because you know what it's like with computers and stuff. Yeah. Unfortunately, I think I've lost a lot of the copies and stuff, but I do have like storyboards of the first episode I wrote on, which was Cleanliness is Next to Edness, which is cool. It's in storage, but yeah, I tend to have a lot of notes all around the place. You know, the way you just kind of have like half thought ideas. Like I tend to keep a lot of bullet points of what I want to do. Like if I'm in the shower, I'll get an idea and I'll write it down, or I carry a notepad around with me, that kind of thing. And what I tend to find is if I just have like a bit of a thin bullet point idea, it tends to percolate over time. So you might, like a couple of weeks later, you'll get a bit more of an idea of what you want to do. And but I'm such a pack rat when it comes to ideas. I've got like those random notes from like 8 years ago that I've just got kept in a shoebox and just like, it'll come in handy one day, one of these days. So
that's fantastic. How often how do I put this? What was a story that you might have like, or an idea that you came up with for a story, not specifically for Ed and Eddy, but just something like you were talking about, oh shit, I'm in the shower, that might make a good story, so you write it down. Do you know what might be the oldest one you might have, as far as going back, that you haven't done anything with yet?
Well, that's a really good question. Well, I suppose like the novel series I'm working on at the moment, that started out as a cartoon idea that I'd actually worked on with Mike Kubat, like the actual kernel of the idea about a young lad who goes back in medieval times via a relic that he finds. And he has to like battle kind of medieval baddies, and it's a bit like Monty Python-esque in its idea, a bit of like, you know, medieval shenanigans and that. And that was something I was working on in my early 20s, and it's kind of like just haunted me for years. And it's slowly morphed into something else with this novel series I'm working on. But I'm just trying to think. Apart from that, I used to write a lot of stories like Little Ghost Girls and things, and like kind of like Lemony Snicket type stories. Magic of modern day I'm very much into.
Yeah, it's funny because you brought up Liverpool. We were actually supposed, during COVID, we had saved for a couple of years. We were going to go to Ireland. We were going to spend a few days in London and just travel around and see everything. But essentially COVID shut that shit down real quick, so we didn't get to go. However, we're trying to make our way out there, hopefully next year after the baby comes and gets settled and all that other shit. And then hopefully, you know, protocols and all that crazy shit will be settled down some, so we can actually travel. And we want to spend about 3 weeks over in the UK. You know, I was in the Navy for a little while, so I got to see, you know, mainly the Middle East, but I got to see a whole bunch of different countries, and I just want to explore more. Especially, I want to see where my people come from. You know, my grandmother tells me either my great grandfather or somebody like that was a baker in the UK, and I would like to go see where he might have been at and all that other crazy. It's just cool seeing where you come from. But when I like to read, I don't like to write because it's for me, it's like I fall asleep on it whenever I start to write, especially when I write essays and shit like that. But do you find that you pull a lot of inspiration from artists and writers that are in your area, or do you pull them from all over the world? Like me specifically, I love Stephen King. He's my favorite of all time. What about you? Who's some of your influences and big writers you like?
Oh gosh, I mean, you just hit on a really good point. I tend to pull a lot of inspiration from all over the place. I'm not one of these people who's like, I only like fantasy writers, so I'm only going to get inspiration from those guys. It's like, I feel like if you narrow yourself down to just one genre or one medium, you're missing out on so much. So, my inspirations, like, I love Stephen King too. I love like Salem's Lot's one of my favorite stories, and I loved the Last Walk and Running Man and all that. So I love Clive Barker. He's actually a lad from Liverpool as well. So like his book is a bit controversial, but Enid Blyton. And I was like into Harry Potter as well. So like I read all those books. I was crazy on Harry Potter for a while. C.S. Lewis. And then like me and my husband watch a lot of anime. So like we're really into Dragon Ball, My Hero Academia, Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. Yes, you too.
So
are you watching MHA?
Yes. Well, here's the thing with anime. Anime has got some of the most ride or die hardcore fans I have ever met in my life, and some of the smelliest people I've ever met in my life. So I need to hear north. So when I started my anime started with Pokemon when I was younger, and then it kind of went into Dragon Ball Z almost instantly. Once I saw the first episode, here's what got me. There's this little green bastard named Piccolo, voiced by Chris Sabat. Now I don't watch true anime, is what they say, because I watch the dub version. Because when I watch stuff like that, I watch it with my son. And when we started watching My Hero last year, he can read really well. For an 11-year-old, he's always reading something. But it's so fast. The pacing is so fast for My Hero that I was having to like pause it and explain to him what they were saying. I was like, I don't want to do this. So I started watching the dub version. And then as soon as I heard Chris Sabat, the voice of Piccolo, as All Might, I was like, fuck, yes, this is my guy. And I like, it used to be Dragon Ball Z was my favorite anime of all time. But My Hero, my God, is it good? Who? You got to pick one. You got to pick one student. You got to pick one teacher, and you got to pick one villain. Who are your three?
Okay. I'm probably gonna say Deku for my main guy. I know he's the main guy, but he's my main guy. I love him. Yeah. He's just a cinnamon roll. Absolutely adore him. I love Aizawa, and I love he's got everyone's interest at heart. But he's very much a kind of backstage player. Like very measured. I do love All Might a lot. Villains though, Ivy's got going on. All for One is genuinely terrifying. Like whenever he's on screen, I'm just like, oh my God, I don't want anywhere near that. So like, really, really loved him. And like, I really enjoyed the last saga that we had. But just the fight scenes are crazy, and like what Deku goes through, his whole journey, and the fact, like, I think Deku is such a relatable character because like he starts off at such a disadvantage to everyone else, and not only does he, anyone who doesn't know MHA, I do apologize, but like he starts off like being one of the few quirkless people in his universe, like, and he's immediately on the back foot. But he is a parable for like having that sheer determination of like, if you want something to happen, and it, you can make it happen. You know what I mean? If you fight hard enough for it, and you will find people who will be your ally and like help you along and draw out the strengths in you. So it's a great show and it's a great message. So yeah, I could talk about MHA and all that stuff all day.
It is phenomenal. Like we're starting to watch season 5. I think they're on now. And then I've been waiting for them to release the dub. Because like I said, once I found out Chris Sabat was All Might, I'm like, I'm never going to watch anything. It's everybody says you lose something in translation, but I at this point, I don't care. It's fucking Piccolo. The galaxy's greatest dad is voicing All Might. But I have to agree with you on the teacher, Aizawa. I thought he was a stoner. I thought he was a student, right? The first time you meet him, he's in a sleeping bag. His eyes are all bloodshot, and he's drinking a Capri Sun. He's drinking a juice box. I'm like, holy shit, there's really a character in here for everybody. He's another stoner. Look at this. Yeah. Phenomenal, right? And then I was like, oh, man, I love this dude. And from him, like everybody looks at him, he's like, oh, he's just angry. No, he's not a one-dimensional character. If you ever seen the movie Shrek describes ogres as onions, right? You peel and that willing to want to be the best to propel him, right? So every Goku has to have a Vegeta, and every Vegeta has to have a Goku, right? That's the way I look at it. Yeah. And as far as villains go, Shigaraki is my guy. That dude is so, yes, he has a temper tantrums and he can act like a child sometimes, but I feel like as the seasons progressed, one of the most coldest moments was when after Overhaul was beaten by Deku in last season, and he comes over and he takes his other arm. I can't remember the dude that he was he was like a carnival barker or the mannequin looking guy that would come and he'd put people in little marbles. I can't remember his name, but he took his arm because Overhaul took his arm. And I was like, holy shit, that was dark. And then Shigaraki comes over and turns his other arm to dust. I got goosebumps now just thinking about it. And there's not one character in that show that is just there for filler. There's not one episode. There's not one wasted dialogue, which is phenomenal.
Absolutely. And like going back to what you were saying about how Bakugo, he could be easily misunderstood as like a one-dimensional character. I feel like Endeavor fits into that category as well, where it's like, you know, I did not like him in the first set. I thought he was awful to his son and he was just generally a bit of an asshole. But obviously you're seeing they've got a very complicated father-son relationship and how that's kind of transforming. And it's really that like with MHA, there's really that clever layers to it, as you say, of like, it's not just, it's like a lot of people describe it as the Japanese X-Men, which I would agree. There's definitely that as an element, but it's all the complicated, you know, factors of being a teenager and, you know, family dynamics and stuff. And it's a really solid series, definitely.
Yeah, it's just one of those things you look at it, you're like, holy shit, this is just so well. When you watch something like this, doing what you do, I mean, do you instantly get like, oh shit, that was so cool? Do you instantly get inspired, or how do you kind of tamper that down when you're watching stuff and just enjoy it like a fan, vice looking at it like, oh, this is a training possibility, or this is something to learn from?
It's a bloody challenge. And can't help but see behind the scenes. So when you start really kind of deep diving into like why a certain story is told the way it is, or, you know, like if you watch interviews with different creators or whatever and you start understanding their process and stuff, it's so hard to switch that off. The amount of times that me and Rob have been watching like a film or, you know, like a TV show, and again, you start pausing, you know, the way you just pause and stuff, and like you start dissecting the scene as it rolls on. It's like, just watch the thing. Well, yeah, do you know what I mean? Like, just shut up and just watch it. But I think you can't, it's really difficult to switch it off. And I feel like when it does switch off, that's when you know you're watching something really good, because like I'm actually enjoying this as a hapless bystander. I'm not trying to like unpick it and like, you know, oh, what goodies can we find in here? So like, that is something that happens for me, and it is really difficult to switch off.
So getting back to you, I think we spent a little bit, I'm pretty sure I'm going to get some comments here on ladies and gentlemen, if you're watching this episode, which you are, and you've gotten this far and we haven't drowned out half the audience with My Hero Academia. This is not a traditional, and none of these episodes will ever be a traditional yes, no. I don't like that bullshit because it's not fun. It feels tailored. It feels, I don't know, man, it just feels weird. I like having real conversation with this, whether people like it or they don't. I mean, it's real. It's not something that's factory made in a farm where we're sitting here talking about you did this, then you did this, because I'm pretty sure you've had those styles of interviews doing what you do, and it's fucking boring. Who wants to sit here and talk about the same shit? You want to give the same answers, and you're like, you can go and find that interview on YouTube anywhere. But nonetheless, man, we're gonna get
it's more like I don't want to do it. So I'm really sorry, Julian. There's like a little bit of a delay, so if I talk over you at any point, I do apologize. I'm not like interrupting you or anything like that. I think I don't want to do a David Copperfield and start from the beginning and bore all the tits off you, basically. Do you know what I mean? It's like I want to tell you, yes, what you want to know about the show and that. And you know, I'm kind of boring in a lot of aspects, so I don't want to give you like the builds. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, no, I completely understand.
Yeah, like every once in a while, I'll get a couple fans be like, "Man, will you just shut the fuck up and let them talk?" Yeah, well, this is a conversation. This is you can go on anybody. There's I think the last time I checked, there's like something about like 1 billion hours or something like that uploaded to YouTube either every day, every week, or some shit like that. If this isn't for you, go find something else that is. If you want a yes, no, see more about a person. When you like, you like that shit too? I like that shit. And then you can converse and talk, and you got other fans, and then you start talking about your process. And that's what a lot of people have something sometimes or stop. Or if it's so engrossing that your mind completely shuts down and you're not thinking about, holy shit, I could take that sequence, or I could take something like that, or I could use that. Something like that inspired me to put this in my work, right? So it's fun seeing what people use and how they get inspired and take that inspiration and put it into their art and make it their own. I just think that's fascinating on how people get to what they're doing. But yeah, so fuck them if they don't like it. I don't give a shit. At the end of the day, man, so we're here to talk about you and Ed, and Eddy. And one of my favorite groups of people to talk to is anybody that worked in AKA. I've heard some of the most phenomenal stories from Joel, the one we can't tell, the one from Big Jim that we told. John and Mike have had some phenomenal ones. When you think about all the times that you've spent with AKA, and all like just working in the trenches with these guys and gals that you work with, from voice actors, artists, and all this other stuff, what are some of your fondest memories, and what are some of your first memories, or well, the ones you recall the most, I guess is what I'm getting at. When you hear AKA or Ed and Eddy, what's the first thing that pops into your mind?
Just family. And I know that that's going to sound so cheesy, and I say that and I cringe a bit inside, but it's absolutely true. And I don't know why it came to that point. I don't know if it's just the nature of, you know, the work we were doing, or, you know, and other guys have probably said this too, like everything was so tightly knit with the way we worked. Danny wanted everyone in the studio, you know what I mean? He didn't really like you working from home and stuff, because it's kind of like he felt that, you know, if you're working on if you're working through an episode, or you're trying to work through an idea, the fact that I can turn to Scott and go, trying to work on this gag, I can't get it to pop the way I want to, but you can, or, you know, we can bounce ideas off each other, or, you know, I can talk to Big Jim or to Jono or whatever. That was something that he very much believed was the right thing for the show. And also they were just like, they were a bunch of frat boy dickheads, but I love them dearly. Do you know what I mean? And like, it was just, you'd come in every day, and you'd get persecuted, but you'd absolutely just laugh your tits off. It would just be so funny, like, and they could make a joke out of anything, and the more they'd make you laugh, the worse it would get. You know the way you just like, I mean, I'm trying to think of specifics here, but it's just like, it would have you just crying, like literally, like you can't breathe, because it just keep escalating these stupid jokes they do. But it was a great, you know, it was very collegiate in the sense of like everyone was involved in the production of every episode. Like, I'm sure someone already mentioned that when it came to storyboarding phase, the whole studio would be in to look at how, like, you'd have those big boards with like the storyboard panels and things, and the director work, you know, like if it was Scott or Big Jim, they would go through each panel and explain how they broke the episode down, and we'd all get to feed in on like how it would probably play out. So yeah, just a big, messy, crazy family. Essentially, that's what I would say about AKA.
Yeah, it's like I said, I enjoy talking to the guys and gals that worked at AKA, because you guys always bring the funniest stories. And we talked just a minute ago, or before we started recording and everything like that, but you got some props and stuff, because you saw Jono hold up some stuff. So let's show everybody what you got, man. It's show and tell.
All right, okay. So on my first day at AKA, Danny gave me this massive plushy plank, and then I've got. See, I don't know if half this stuff made it into the shops, but I've got Ed and Eddy plushies. So there's like an Eddy plushie, I've got Ed plushie, double D plushie, probably. So, we've got that. I've got, this is Yamroll. This is a plushie from Jono's cartoon that he did after season 4 of Ed and Eddy. And it's got these like crazy like little bendy figures as well. So I don't know if you can see this. You got Ed. I've got one of Kevin as well. But you know what? Kubat had an Ed and Eddy beach towel, and I said, "Where did you get that from?" And he wouldn't tell me. I think it was and the more wound up I got about it, the worse it got. So like, I think you could have got it at Target, but you know, you couldn't find Ed and Eddy merchandise anywhere. Like, it was so difficult to try and find it. So like, I think with this, to be fair, it's because the Cartoon Network used to send it up to the studio and stuff. But yeah, just one last thing. This is Bag Puss. Jono got this for my wedding. Like, it just turned up randomly. Like, what? Because what happened was, I got years and years ago for Dan Seaweed, the producer, I got him a cup when I came back to the UK on a visit Bagpuss is like this weird 1950s British like puppet show, stop motion puppet show. I got like, there was like a little alarm clock with a Bagpuss toy on it, and Dan was obsessed with it. Like he just had it on his desk for years. So like Bagpuss became like this honorary mascot character in the studio. So like when that turned up on my doorstep like the day after the wedding, I was just like, just crying. So yeah, so that's my stuff there.
That's phenomenal. You mentioned something I wanted to circle back to, that if you were having trouble finding or trying to work something out, you would go to Scott.
Yeah.
With this show, who would you go to frequently? Would it be writers, or would you guys just go to the artists right off the bat? Like, man, I can't get this shit down. Can you help me with it?
I don't know. I suppose when I was first like drafting an episode, like writing an episode out, it would normally be Mike and Jono I'd get on the phone to, and it, would be a case of like, I'll just give Jono a ring and just go, right, I've got this, trying to work through this scene. And because what would sometimes happen is you'd have like the premise of the episode, which would be about 3 or 4 sentences long, but sometimes when you try to expand outwards, it would feel a bit like flat.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would sometimes phone Jono and go, trying to make this work, what do you reckon? And then we try and hash it out of like what it would kind of develop into. Mm-hmm. And I suppose when it got to like outline script stage, that's when I would really start talking to the guys in storyboard. So like, I mean, they brought so many of their own unique strengths to it. Like Big Jim is fantastic at structure. Like he can take like a kind of wibbly wobbly story and just give it that real backbone that it needs to work. And then you've got Scott, who you'd have like, I mean, I'll give you examples. So there's an episode, Tinker Ed, where Jimmy kind of loses his faith in like fantasy and fairies and stuff. I don't know if you remember the whole the loads of bologna joke that Rolf did when he was paranoid someone was going to steal his bag of bologna. That was Scott. Scott came up with that because it was such a Jimmy fixated episode. There wasn't a lot for like the other characters to do, but like having this stupid gag with Rolf running up and carrying his loads of bologna. It just kind of it took like, my dumb idea and just made it a lot like funny and like, a lot more dynamic. So there was that. And then Wooty because he worked with me on the Ed to Come and the Ed to Come in space episode, and I just feel like if you give Wooty something weird, he'll just absolutely run with it. Like, he'll do like that kind of otherworldly stuff and just be, his brain is just another dimension to the rest of us. Like, he just thinks on such another level. And then with Joel, he's fantastic at like, really giving things that emotional like resonance. Do you know what I mean? Like he knows so intuitively how the characters all work together and stuff. So if I was trying to get a particular mood across, or like, a kind of interaction, he'd be great at like, well, Double D would probably say this, or Kevin would probably do that. So they were like 4 kind of like, I'm going to put it like adjudicators of different things I can talk to. Like, go leave my offering and go, please, mighty lords, what do I do?
That's phenomenal. Now, there's one thing I want to bring up, because Mike and Jono both had the same answer. And I don't know if we think it, but thank you, Mike and Jono, for turning me on to Rachel and making the connection, because I'm really having fun with this conversation. This is one of the best ones I've had as of late. And I don't know if it's just because I'm becoming more relaxed with doing this stuff, or if I'm starting to find a better flow, or like I said earlier, I just don't give a shit what anybody else thinks. If they like it, they like it. If they don't, they don't. I hope they do, because there's a lot of stuff that you can pull from this. And I already know what I'm going to use for this episode. I started doing teaser trailers, and I'm for sure using the strip club every Friday as the teaser for this episode. But I wanted to circle back just for a second, because Mike and Jono both said, and everybody's going to be different when it comes to what characters or what characters were great for them to write and what characters were a lot harder for them to write. And they both said Naz. Now, I don't want to paint this, because you can't get away from the shit in the media. We're all the same, but we're all different, right? I don't want to plant this like, oh, these are, white dudes trying to write a female and it's just not going to work. You need a female writing a female, because there's females that voice male characters that nobody knows. Nancy Cartwright, the voice of Bart. I did not know for the longest time that it was a female. When I found that, I'm like, holy shit. I didn't, because I sound like a guy. I can't make myself sound like a girl. So when a girl can sound like a guy and a guy can sound like a girl, I'm like, holy shit, this is magic, right? So I got to imagine it's the same thing when it comes to like, there's some artists that completely crush a female's character in comics and books and all this other stuff when they draw it, and there's some that just have a hard time with it. So with that being said, they had a hard time writing Naz. And I don't know if it was because they were both men or if it was because she was just a very plain character. They said it was because she was very basic and very plain. Specifically, for you, was it difficult writing Naz, or who were some of the difficult characters and who were some of the easy characters for you to slip right into and write?
Yeah, I would. It's difficult really because I love Naz. I think she's like what I think Naz brings to it. She has a lot of moral fiber in that, like, if the kids ever did anything shitty, she would pull them on it. You know what I mean? So she had a lot of empathy.
Mm-hmm.
And I suppose you could argue, well, it's a daft kids cartoon where, you know, hijinks happen and, you know, a piano falls on Eddy's head and we all laugh and la-di-da, which is fine. But like, I feel what was great with Naz is that she would come in and like kind of challenge people on stuff. Like, you know, she would call the Eds out on their shit. She would call Kevin out on his shit. Yeah. And like, she had a genuinely good heart to her. You know what I mean? I suppose. And like, you know, but I must admit, it was sometimes difficult trying to figure out what other different things can we do with Naz, because she is very much this ornamental character. Do you know what I mean? Of like, you know, she's someone we all kind of moon at, like, you know, gaze at. That's not the right word, moon at. But yeah, no, it's so I did sometimes struggle with Naz a little bit. I suppose, how can I put it? I think I wrote better with Double D and Eddy. Ed, sometimes I don't think I always did justice, because like he was a lot like the kind of wild card of, like, you know, he would follow along what the other two were doing. So I did sometimes struggle with Ed-centric episodes, but yeah, so, and I suppose like Lee Kanker, I never really, like, Marie and May are actually, they're really fun to write with. Like, really tapped into the fact Marie is super jealous, and like, you know, like in the Valentine's special and stuff, and she's really feisty and she's really quite like she wants to kind of be up in everyone's business and that, and like, and that's what I found really interesting about Marie. And then you got May, who's like kind of a secret like genius and all this, and but Lee, apart from her being the bossy older sister, was really quite difficult to figure out what she was all about as well. Like, so yes, I'd probably say Lee Kanker and Naz were quite difficult to write for sometimes, but you know, who knows, if we'd had the right premise or whatever, it could have brought something out in them down the line.
Yeah, when it comes to, those are the two hardest you said. So who are the ones that it felt like putting on a pair of shoes, like, oh, this shit is easy, I can slip right into these characters?
Oh god, probably Double D.
Yeah.
I've always felt like I've had a lot in common with Double D, like the you know, the sensitivity, the introversion, being a total nerd, about, like, you know, just really just deep diving on just stuff that no one else cares about. Like, you want to talk about turning off your followers, I could sit here and talk about medieval history like all day, every day, Julian. No one will come back. Like, don't get it on again. Do not bring that ball on again. So yeah, so Double D was like, you know, just being able to tap into that total just constant awkwardness, and always obsessing about what people are thinking about him, and always like worrying about like doing the right thing. And then there's Eddy, because with Eddy you can just completely go into your, like, if I did not give a monkeys what people thought of me, what would I do? And what I love about Eddy was it's just, he's unstoppable. Like, you know, you can't keep him down. You know what I mean? He's just, it's kind of inspiring. Like, you know, he is that Tumblewumba song, I get knocked down but I get up again, you know. So that's what I love about him.
I've been doing this shit for 8 months and nobody has brought up that song. It is phenomenal. There's a whole bunch of people that are like 18. They're like, what the fuck song are they talking about? They're going to Google it. Somebody's going to blow up in the charts right now. They're going to get a platinum record off of this. So thank you for that. One of my favorite characters to ever, because he always had the best insults, was Rolf. He was like, when I had Peter on, it was so hard. It was like, you ever go to or watch a nature documentary, and they always say if there's a gorilla, you look down, you don't look him in the eyes because it'll try to assert dominance. That's what I had to do with Peter. Not because I was trying to like assert dominance or anything like that, because like looking at him and the way he talks, the way he moves and all this other stuff, he's very animated. And every time I would look at him, I would try my hardest not to laugh. My face was hurting because I was holding it back, because he's just a funny guy. And it's the same thing with Rolf. He had the best insults. And it felt like every season it was just like, let me see what I can do with Rolf. Let me see if I can let me see if I can do this, that, and the other. Was he one of those characters that you just absolutely loved? And who would come up with a lot of those zingers and one-liners for Rolf?
Oh God, well, to be fair, Danny used to come up with a lot of them.
Yeah.
Because I think, I don't know if Mike mentioned this in a previous one, because a lot of it is based on his experience as a first generation Italian. So he would just throw out all this total weirdness that, like, obviously just drawing from his own experience and stuff. And then Mike would lean in on that hard. And then I think everyone really enjoys having fun with Rolf. I mean, like, I certainly did. Like, there was like the episode No Speak to Ed, and we were able to kind of delve into Rolf's trauma a little bit, like his traumatic childhood and that, with being stalked by the Wolf brothers.
Yeah.
And just that's the kind of stuff I was talking to you about before, like the weird Russian fairy tale kind of grim dark stuff. He is a lot of fun to mess with. And I think the fact that he's not actually nailed down to a particular country in real life, there's like kind of, there's elements of different places, I suppose, like Eastern Europe and India and things like that. It just means that you can pretty much take him in any direction, and you don't really have to worry about hopefully offending anyone. So,
Hey man, he was such a fantastic character, and what I loved, and I've said it multiple times on this whenever I have you guys and gals from AKA, all these characters that were on the show, you can pick them out from kids that you grew up with. Yeah. Not to the extreme that Rolf was, because I always notice it. This show is a lot like wrestling, and what I mean by that, and I'm wearing a wrestling T-shirt, and I don't, Dusty Rhodes, right? So what I mean by that is some of the best characters you have in wrestling are themselves, but dialed up to like 100. Like, what can you do if this person had no boundaries? They could just do whatever they want. They could be zany, and they could just be free to do whatever they want. That's what a lot of these characters felt like, because everybody had a Rolf. Everybody had that one asshole that always wanted to beat him up, call him a nerd, take off with a bike and all this other shit. Everybody had a Naz. Everybody had somebody that they absolutely admired and would love to date, or whatever you wanted to do back in the day. And same thing, everybody had a car salesman like Eddy. Everybody had that dumb person. Everybody had that really smart person everybody hung around, right? And that's what stuck out so much in this show. And when you guys are doing that, obviously you're going to have a different story than Jono, and Jono's going to have a different story than Mike, and Mike's going to have a different story than Danny. When you guys are writing an entire season of something and everybody has an episode, now obviously, one's not leading into the other to tell an overarching story. But how do you guys make that kind of match, like your style with Jono's and Jono's with Mike's and vice versa?
Like, when at the episode writing stage, or like
how do you guys make it seem like it's flowing? It doesn't seem like, when I watched this show, it felt like the same person wrote everything, the same person drew everything, right? So how do you guys mix and match your styles whenever you guys are collaborating? Because you guys said it's a very collaborative show, but how do you guys mix and match your styles to make it seem like it's never ending? There's no cuts, there's no deleted scenes type of thing.
I suppose it's difficult, really. I suppose, like, it's because because Danny was involved with, like, at every stage, you know what I mean? So he was there to make sure they had that kind of consistency all the way through with how each episode's going to turn out. But I suppose as well, because we worked up, we would second guess ourselves and run, like, kind of run ideas past each other, and like, you just, when you're working on a property for years, especially in the case of Mike and Jono and the storyboard guys, you just kind of pick up on what the feel of the show is, and it just becomes a bit more intuitive. You kind of, like, it is like putting on the overall for your job, and like, right, I'm sat in the cul, essentially I'm sat in the cul-de-sac. I've got the boys in front of me, and I know them. I'm familiar with them. Like, I know intuitively what they do, and it's just you tend to, when you're working with them, day in, day out, and that, and bouncing ideas, it just all seems to, like, blend together, and that, and it's like you tend to start knowing, like, what would work and what wouldn't work, and and that's kind of what I was like alluding to before, of like, when you'd work on something with the storyboard guys, like, they would say, well, I just don't feel like Rolf would say that, or like, Kevin would say that, and they've got 4 seasons worth of evidence to know what they're talking about. So yeah, that's I think that's what it is. We all just kind of were singing from the same hymn sheet in that sense.
it felt like everybody wanted the same thing. Everybody wanted to put the best cartoon forward. So that, oh shit, hit the mic. That obviously will help, because if you've got these people that aren't team players, right? And obviously hearing everything that I've heard about Danny, that just wouldn't happen because they'd get the fuck out. If nobody wanted to play ball, go find some other studio to work at. So it's nice to hear that everybody wanted to make the best that they could make. And a lot of that was because Danny was pushing you guys harder. Like some of the stories that I've heard, it was like the Post-it notes are one of my favorite stories of all time. Hearing some of, did you draw this with your ass, or for a new job, or shit like that. And I want to get to the Post-it notes if you got any, but you hit on something that I want to circle back for just a second. I lost my train of thought. So we're going to have to talk about the Post-it note story real quick. So do you have any Post-it notes that you have gotten?
I'm trying to think of the specific Post-it notes, but I will tell you, one time I handed in an episode outline, and the only note I got was no. Basically, Danny just took his famous red pencil, crossed each page, and just wrote no over it. And it wasn't no, do this instead, or no, this didn't work, but try this. It was just no. So like, I was like, cool, what do I do with that? So, I mean, to be fair, that only happened the once. I think it was probably like in the earlier episodes I worked on. But yeah, like sometimes it was like kind of just like, I need some butter for this waffle, like, because it would just like, because admittedly, you know, as evidenced by this podcast, I do tend to waffle sometimes. So it's like some, you know, should be a 3-page outline could sometimes be a 5-page outline, and so a lot of my advice was to self-edit and like, you know, like trim things down and tighten it up and stuff. But yeah, it was mainly just blah blah blah. Need some butter on this waffle, and no. So they were the main takeaways I had.
When you have something like that and you're getting, I figured out what my point was. When you're getting a script and he's saying no, or he's saying trim the fat, essentially, right? Make it tighter. What do you look at first to start trimming? For you specifically, whenever you got a script, because you obviously, whenever you put something in, you're like, oh, this is good. And then you have somebody else proofread it. You're like, oh shit, this needs to change. There's no real direction from it. They get here to here. So when you have something like that, where you have a script and it says edit no, or find something else, what do you look at first? Do you go and reread the entire thing and just start seeing where you can trim out the like ums or the pauses or stuff like that? Or what do you do for you?
If I got back an outline and the feedback was basically boring, do it again. I would hand it off to, I'd probably maybe give it to someone like Mike or Jono, and I'd just be like, is there something in this that's kind of jumping out as unnecessary? Is it boring? Like, because each sentence essentially had to move the story along. So you'd say like, you know, Eddie was angry today, therefore he kicked Double D in the arse, therefore, and like everything that you basically thought of like had to be, you know, it wasn't they did this and they did this. So if I found myself falling into that trap where I was just kind of like, you know, when you were in school and you're doing like your elementary exercise of what did you do over the summer, Julian? It was, you had to think, right, is each sentence in this outline, is it actually moving the story along? Are you getting from the first sentence of this premise, the initial episode premise that you had, how long is it taking you to get from sentence 1 to sentence 2 of that plot point? So if it was taking ages to get there and I could feel my own impatience of trying to get to the next point, then I'd know something was wrong. But yeah, sometimes it is just give it to someone else, let them read it. They're going to give you their unbiased opinion. And that could sometimes, you know, kick in of like, you know, if they said, you know, this doesn't work for me, or why don't you try this? A light bulb will go off and you go, ooh, you know, like, and that's, and you know, you'd be able to do a much better draft. So yeah, I would do that a lot of the time.
What would you do to get yourself, as because you said like if you're in the shower you have an idea, like, oh shit, I gotta write that down, or you're watching something or something happens, you know, life imitates art and art imitates life and vice versa, right? So you see something, and if you go outside you can observe a ton of shit. I love people watching when we go to the mall, because you see things that people do, like little idiosyncrasies or how they touch their hair. It's just wild to see that we're all the same thing, but we're all different, right? There's so many of us and we're all different. But for you specifically, whenever you're writing a story, is there certain things that you like to almost set the mood, like you dim the lights down, you put on your favorite movie for background, or you put on something, or what is the process for you?
Okay, so like I've got like music I'll listen to. I listen to a lot of ASMR. So like if I'm writing like a fantasy scene or whatever, I'll listen to some like epic music or something to kind of like get fired up to write it. I'll go for a walk. Like I'm really fortunate that I live by a load of forest, so I'll go for a really, I'll go for a run in the morning, or like, I'll go for a walk around the campus or whatever. Sometimes, I'll flick through some comics and like just get, an idea of how I want a scene to play out. But it's really what I've tried to move away from is limit saying I can only write when the muse presents themselves, because I feel like if you do that, you'll be waiting a long time, basically. So my advice to anyone would be don't wait for the muse to decide they're going to turn up. Grab their ass to the table and go, hey muse, get it together, I need to write. So whether you open up notepads and just write a load of crap down and just get all the junk out your head first. Like I find morning journaling and like, just getting up and just writing freehand in the morning can really help, because like you don't realize how much trash you're carrying in your head all the time. And it's a lot like when you've got a computer and it's full of files and it's really slow and it takes ages to do anything, you're not always thinking about all the crap you've got saved on there. So if you ever got writer's block, or you're like, if I could just get into the right mindset, sit down with a legal notepad or whatever, just write, just get out everything that you can out. And it's amazing. Sometimes it can really just get you into that mode that you need to be in. So I do that. But yeah, it's just if I find that I'm really fixated on something and I can't make it work, I'll put it down and I'll go away and I'll go go have a shower, go for a walk, I'll go talk to a friend, something like that. And then in the background sometimes it tends to like sort itself out. You just got to take your mind off it sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, that's a valid point. And this is going to sound like a super pretentious question, but I like to ask it nonetheless because of Danny's stance on fuck digital art. Now, obviously, writing is different because it's art, but it's not what he was talking about when he said fuck digital art. It's the pen to paper, it's the paint on the cells and all this other stuff is what he was really getting at. But for you, do you feel like you are a better writer when you're doing it on that legal pad and pen and paper, or do you feel like you get better stuff when you're on a computer typing everything out? What's more accessible to you, I guess?
I mean, if I'm feeling particularly blocked, like writing wise, I will just go and sit down and just write. I think one of my problems is that I try and edit as I go along. I've got a really persistent inner critic.
Yeah.
They will sit there, this voice will be there going, that shit, don't do that, or like, what are you writing like that for? Yeah. So, but if I go away and like do like the mechanical act of just, no one cares what you're writing, Rachel, just write any old crap, who cares?
Yeah.
Taking that judgment off and just getting it out on the page is so cathartic. But yeah, so I got I work in marketing. I write for hours each day doing copy, things like that. But sometimes you just cannot beat a pen and paper. You can't, just to like, get a bit of freedom in what you're trying to say.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. You brought up something, because I'm the same way, where I'll sit there and I think almost everything I do is just shit, right? Because it's something about like whatever it is as far as like being a creative person. So my day job, I work in a kitchen, right? I cook. So it's very artistic in a sense. But when I have people over and I cook for them, they're like, oh, this is so great. This is so delicious. And I'm thinking like, yeah, it needed more salt. It needed this. It needed that. It needed this. I see everything that's wrong with it by seeing, I don't know what it is about us being people, because we always tend to gravitate towards what's the negative aspect of whatever we're doing, which is so detrimental to your mental health when you think about it. It's like, if you're consistently shitting, what does one of two things? Pressure does two things. It either busts pipes or it creates diamonds, right? Now, when you're sitting there and you're consistently, shitting on yourself, you could fold and just like, oh man, I suck at this, I'll just give up. Or it makes you a better person. You're like, okay, if I suck at this, how do I actively get better at that, right? So I like that inner turmoil, I guess, if that's anything, that inner critic. Sometimes we're harsher on ourselves than anybody can really ever be. If you saw half the shit that was in my head that I say about myself on a consistent basis, like, Jesus Christ, you need a hug, man. You all right? But my inner voice, right? I like to give them funny accents, right? Sometimes there's somebody from Australia or sometimes they're super Southern, so they're Georgia or Texas or something like that. What does your inner critic sound? Does it sound like you, or do you give it a funny accent too?
No, she sounds like a bit like Dolores Umbridge from Harry Potter, like this kind of like Roald Dahl-esque kind of villainous woman in like a tweed suit and like, you know, hair's like pulled back in a really severe bun, and she's just kind of looking down there like, you know what I mean? That's what my one's like. Yeah, so that's what I would describe her as.
Jesus Christ, that's like the evilest person you could possibly pick as being a critic.
Yeah. Just like a weird, awful school teacher who probably needs to get laid, like that, you know, like, but like, but just like, you know, is never pleased with anything that you do and stuff, and it just, but it, and it's really like you know, but really persistent in that. But I also do appreciate what you're saying of like, sometimes it's that kind of introspection that really pushes you forward, and it's like, you know, you working in the kitchen, I admire that greatly. I can barely make toast, so it's like, you know, my fella's the cook in this house, so it's like the fact that, you know, you're obviously so passionate about it, and like, you know, you got people going, wow, Julian, this is amazing. Like, yeah, it is bloody amazing. And like working in the kitchen is one of the most stressful work environments you can be in. So absolutely, props to you, mate. Absolutely.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And it's come up twice now. We've talked about Harry Potter. And one thing I've always liked, because depending on the person, right? I don't know how big, because I didn't live over there when this was happening. I know how big Harry Potter was here, because that was the first book. And when you were in school, where'd you go to school at when you were in elementary school and shit? Was it UK, right?
Yes, it was, yeah.
Okay, now do you guys, we call them scholastic book fairs, where they would come into the school and then you could buy books and stuff like that. Did you guys have that too?
We did, yeah, we did. And it was super exciting. Yep.
It was the best days in school, right? You go there, you get to pick out a new book, and you're like, oh shit, there's posters and pencils and all this other stuff. I remember when Harry Potter was huge, right?
Yeah.
It had teachers, and it was very like, America's very, very religious where I was at when I was growing up and stuff. So they had people with picket signs that we don't want Harry Potter in the school. Same thing with the movies. Did you guys see any of that when it was coming on, like witchcraft and all that other shit?
Not too much, because to be honest, like Britain's a funny old place, because yes, we've got like, you know, we have, you know, Christianity is like the kind of one of the dominant religions here and stuff, and you know, I went to an all-girl Catholic school and that, but you know, I suppose witchcraft and wizardry is kind of in the tapestry of our nation's identity. So it's like it's something that's kind of gone. It's always kind of ran parallel to, you know, our religious identity as well. So, you know, we didn't get. I mean, maybe we did. I wasn't aware of any kind of controversy. At least, you know, being in Liverpool as well, like there is always this kind of flirtation with the unknown. Like you got a lot of people who like were very much into our ghost stories and things, and you know, the whole the Irish side of our identity, as well as like, you know, like with different folklores and things like that. So yeah, we didn't see too much of that at all. But with the scholastic book fairs, yeah, ours used to turn up in a bus. Like we used to have a double-decker bus, like you'll know the London, those kind of big red London buses and that. Like it was kind of like that kind of bus that would rock up, and you'd get on, and you'd like all the seats would have been turned into shelves and things, and it was like all full of books and that. But yeah, it was amazing when that turned up, and you could get like tokens as well that you could save up through the year and have like a little book that you could play in books with and stuff. But yeah, you just reminds me actually. The first time I wanted to become a writer was because some girl who was like 10 years old managed to publish a book. Mm-hmm. And this can sound really arrogant, but I was reading it going, I can do better than that. I can write a book.
You were Dolores Umbridge before Dolores Umbridge.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
The only reason I brought up Harry Potter is because it was so huge here. It's huge all around the world. But yeah. I've met a few people, when I was still in the Navy, we did a proof of concept mission. I'll keep this story very short. And we went on a British royal ship, right? For the life of me, I can't remember the name of it. I'll have to ask Ricky, because he was, oh shit, where was he from? Not Wales. Fuck, I can't remember. There was a beer made after it, some kind of pale ale or some shit like that. Newcastle maybe? I don't know. Fuck it, I don't know. I'm rambling at this point. But I remember because I was rereading the last one, and then he saw me read it, and he's like, "Oh man, you're one of those Americans, huh?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" And he was like, "Dude, nobody reads that bullshit." And I was like, "What are you talking about? I see so many people reading Harry Potter." And he was like, "Us people in the UK hate when you Americans come over because you guys are in your cloaks, you got your little wands pointing at shit." And I was like, "Are you fucking with me right now?" And he's like, "Nah, not really." He's like, and he says, "I'm trying to take the piss out of it," but he's like, he was like, "I just don't like Harry Potter." So I mean, he's like, "I was fucking with you, man." He was like, "There's a lot of people over here that like it." But who I guess what I'm getting at is who had it bigger? Was it America that just took it to a whole new level when it came Harry Potter, or were you guys super rabid fans over there too when all of this was happening, if you can remember?
To be fair, I was already kind of in America and then in Canada when we were like kind of like book 3, book 4. So I think you guys went loop-de-loop for it.
Really
you were kind of in your Pottermania phase by the time I was already living on your side of the pond. So I don't think it, I don't remember seeing as much of a mania in the UK when I came back and stuff. I was back in the UK by the time book 7 came out, and I was one of the ones who was down there like a bit like getting my copy and all this, and like there was a big queue and all that. But yeah, I feel like it with America it really blew up because like there is so much about it that's so like quaint and quintessentially English. So yeah, I just it always felt like a travesty to my husband that they didn't have like a kind of Hogwarts, an actual like life-size Hogwarts like outside of London that you could visit. You know what I mean? It is like wasn't always available unless you went to like I think it's Universal Studios. There was like a kind of Potter Wales, and now they got one in London and stuff. But yeah, there was potential to do a lot more there. But yeah, but I can't. It's just it's I can't describe it like because a lot of people didn't like when they met me when I was in the US for the first time. I got called Australian, I got called Irish, which I understand. Got called Norwegian. I was like, what? Like, but yeah, very few people thought I was actually English. So yeah, go figure.
I don't want to sound like I'm out of place, but the only reason I ask this is because I love accents and I love hearing how people talk and trying to figure yours out. I figured it was some kind of, UK. It was some kind of in there with London. I don't want to say London because they have a specific way of talking, and everybody branches out, and they have all these other different talking. And, so I was thinking, is Cockney the wrong term? Is that the wrong term for how you sound, or what is? I guess what would your accent be labeled as?
It's called Scouse. If you're from Liverpool,
okay.
We're called Scousers. And that comes from the fact that the city's kind of dish, Liverpool dish, is a stew that's called scouse, which is basically like everything under the sun is thrown in there. But it was actually Norwegian sailors that I think it's like a lobster. It's like lobster scouse or something that they were always eating when they were there, and it just kind of went in from there. But yeah, my accent is kind of like a melting pot of like different. So you got like Irish, you got Welsh, you got Scottish, you've got Norwegian, and you've got a blend of all of the different accents. It's really difficult to pinpoint like where Welsh ends and where Norwegian begins with the Liverpool accent. But God, I made this right with AKA. I made the mistake once of like we went to a restaurant, and well, you guys use the way you say burger. So we go to this freaking restaurant, and I'm about to order, and I'm starving. I go, yeah, I'll just have some chips and a burger, please. And the way I said burger, like Joel and Wooty just spun around like the Exorcist, like, what did you say? I'm like, I just ordered a burger and chips. Well, that was it for the next 3 years. You're right, burger. How did you do burger? And like that was me, my life, my identity. To like, well, even now it's like, yeah.
Those fuckers have no reason or no room to talk. They say a boot instead of about, and they say sorry. They say sorry when it should be sorry. But I talk funny too. Instead, there's a few words like every time at work I get made fun of because where I live at in Florida and specifically in the South, there's a lot of like words that we don't say proper, like most people do. You pick up what you say and what your family says, and that's kind of how your identity goes with language and stuff like that. So, me specifically, instead of saying potato, I say potatoes, right? So there's an A at the end. Tomato, tomatoes, right? Shit like that. And I get picked on all the time they call me a farmer. They call me, you know, some weird shit like that. So it's always funny hearing somebody else's get made fun of because they say a word funny. And like I said, these Canadians have no room to talk. But nonetheless, man. So as we start to wind down, thank you for the Harry Potter talk. I didn't think you were going to come on here and think we were going to talk about Harry Potter. We could have went in a deep rabbit hole. I'll show you real quick. Back there is like all my trades and stuff like that.
Amazing.
Yeah, I'm a huge comic book fan. Anything from Batman to Flash to. Did you ever read Chew from IDW? Or
no.
Image. Let me get one of the books real quick and I'll show you. This is a phenomenal book. It's a few years old now. It's called Chew.
Amazing.
This one is this guy. Whenever he tastes something, he can tell what happened. So like say the chef was back there cooking something, and this is in a time where chicken is illegal. You cannot have chicken, right? So the chef was back there and he cut himself and the blood dripped into the soup. So when this guy ate the soup, he saw that this chef had killed somebody. So he's a detective and he's figuring out that's his superpower. He can taste stuff and he can tell where that piece of something came from. And the only food that he can't do it with, I think it's beets, is the only thing that he can eat and not taste where it came from. But whenever he eats something, he knows where it was grown, if somebody was killed there, and then he tracks these people down. Phenomenal book. That is a great book. If you like that type of shit, it's really, really cool. But yeah, we could have went down a super deep rabbit hole when it came to comics. Harry Potter for sure. A couple questions as we wrap up.
Yeah.
And we'll leave the last couple ones for the Ed and Eddy questions. But before we move off of Harry Potter, who's your favorite character in Harry Potter? And what was your favorite book?
My favorite book was Goblet of Fire. Okay. Because you really felt like the stakes went up super high because you had all these different schools coming in. You obviously had the tournament, like it's going to call it the Tournament of Power. That's Dragon Ball. So you got like the tournament that Harry goes through and stuff, and like you could feel like the real danger going on there. I think my favorite character was probably Ron. I just really just related to Ron. Like, you know, he's just trying to get by, and he
redhead.
And he does bumble a lot and stuff, but he's got good intentions and things. He's a really good mate to Harry. So yeah, any Ron scenes, because he just really like, I loved his family. They were super cute. So and like I really loved Snape, even when he was just being a total dick to Harry and stuff. So but yeah, like with comics and things, I would say my favourites would probably be one of them is The Superior Foes of Spider-Man. I really, really enjoyed that. It was it was super funny. It was basically Spider-Man meets Arrested Development. That's the way I would describe it. I think what else? I'm really enjoying. There's a series written by my friend James Lawrence called The Legend of La Mariposa. And that's actually a lucha adventure story, so you might like it because it's got wrestling elements in there.
What's it called?
The Legend of La Mariposa. Okay. And it's by James Lawrence, and it's about this female lucha wrestler, and she goes on a quest for glory. Okay. And she goes up against kind of supernatural and monster like lucha enemies and things, but it's a very super cute, super funny, very good, great for kids as well. So it's like that's a new series I've gotten into, and then like with other comics and that I was reading.
But have you read God Country by Donny Cates?
No, I've heard of it though. I've heard good things about it.
Shit, it's one of those books where you read. It's one of those books, movies, TV shows, whatever it is. You read it and you're like, holy shit! If this was what he had in his heart and his brain, and this is what he needed to get out, you're like, this is a masterpiece. When I finished it, because I don't know about you guys, but we get our comics every Wednesday. And now that DC kind of separated from Diamond last year, they come in on Tuesday, but they still don't put them out until Wednesday. So ours are every Wednesday we get new comics. And I go down there and I get my stack. And then I always go to whoever's working, whether it's, it used to be Sam, but now it's John or McGee or whoever. I go like, hey, what would you suggest as far as like indie books? Because that's what I'm trying to get into. I'm a huge DC fan. I'm a huge Marvel fan, but I like Marvel for the secondary characters. Before Daredevil got huge, She-Hulk, all-time favorite, that's the wrong one. But favorite Marvel hero has always been She-Hulk. Nice. I'm such a fan. Because Hulk is such a hard character to read, right? He's like Superman. He's ever powerful. The stronger he gets because he gets angrier. It's somebody it's stupid to read. I can't get into it. However, Immortal Hulk is fantastic if you're not reading it. That's a great book. And it's getting ready to wrap up too. But I always go in there and ask them, like, hey, what would you suggest as far as indie? As long as it's like a first issue and I can read it and see if I like it. The last thing I want to do is read a trade. And then I'm like, oh, fuck, I got to go sit here and try to find 20 issues of this shit so I can figure out the backstory. However, I did this with God Country. He goes and he pulls off a trade. I'm like, dude, I don't want to buy a trade right now. He's like, it's $10. It'll be the greatest $10 you will ever spend. And I'm like, fuck it, man. You've never been wrong here. It's like, I can't stump the guy on anything when it comes to comics. And he always gives good recommendations. And I take it home, and that's the first thing I read. I read it in like 30 minutes. I call back. I'm like, dude, put me down for volume 2. And he's like, buddy, I hate to tell you this, man, but that's the only one. And I was like, whoa. What do you mean the only one? He was like, that's a single containing story, 5 issues, boom, it's done. He's done. And it's getting made into a TV series on AMC apparently.
Right.
Phenomenal. I can't recommend that one enough. If you get the chance, God Country by Donny Cates.
Cool.
But yeah, like I said, so we got a couple questions here. Ed and Eddy pretty much is what it's related to. When you came on to write Ed and Eddy, we asked you what your first couple days were like, or what the first kind of, like, oh shit, I'm here, and who you were working with, all that other crazy shit. Was there any stories? I didn't write the person's name down, so I apologize for not writing you guys' names down. It was just something I was under the fire to get done. But do you remember any stories that you wanted to write that maybe didn't make it, that you tried to pitch?
I think now, because it's like, God, it's you know what? I'll wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and go, I should have said this, but I can't. I was really happy that we managed. There was a story called A Town Called Ed, and it was where they find out the history of Peach Creek, and I didn't think that would get through, because I thought, oh, Danny's not going to want to do like a historical episode, but we did manage to get it through eventually, where the lads like look at like the pilgrim heritage and things. I think there was this one bloody episode called Luck Being Ed Tonight, and it was essentially, from what I remember, it was like where Eddy had unstoppable luck, and like it was essentially, I guess it was a lot like the invention of lying, like that kind of premise of just like, what could you do if you were unstoppable? But it kind of like defeats itself, because it's like, well, if you've got Eddy who's got unstoppable luck, what can you really do to put that, you got to wrap this up in 11 minutes, what do you do with it? So we really, really struggled with what we were going to do. And I'm starting to think if this is where the rumor of the lost episode came from, because this bloody episode, we tried so hard to like make it work. And we had to just can it eventually, but it was just floating around and around and around in like the slush pit for like of what we were going to do. So I do wonder if maybe that was what started that rumor. So I guess there was that one, and I'm trying to think, we wanted to do like a girls only episode at some point, but it was like, what are we gonna have the girls do and like not have any of the lads turn up? Like, it's just okay, cool, but what do they do for 11 minutes? So I suppose it was that really, but fortunately, to be honest, if the idea felt true to like who the Eds were, we usually could find a way to at least get it into it, get sent off to Cartoon Network, and they would weigh it up and that. So I would probably say it was kind of those two kind of thin ideas that I'm thinking of where we just really struggled to do anything with them.
Now this one's a hypothetical question, but if you could take any character and do an instant spin-off series with them, who would you take?
I think. God, you really put me on the spot here. I don't know. Probably. I'm really sorry. I'm really struggling to think. But probably Plank, to be honest. Like, could you just think of the weird kind of Doctor Strange-esque adventures you could have with Plank?
Could you imagine if he had the Infinity Gauntlet and he was just traveling and jumping through time? Does he get the cape like Doctor Strange had, or no?
I think he would. I think he would have a cape of endless possibility. Yeah.
Does he badass goatee that Benedict Cumberbatch had, or no? Yeah. That'd be phenomenal.
I can see him in like a Captain Kirk situation of like, Captain, the ship's going down. What are we going to do?
He just falls over.
It's like.
That's great. Man, come to the What's in My Head podcast for Doctor Strange and Plank crossovers. I love. I hope that happens. Last question here. When you sit back and you think about everything that you've done thus far with the Eds, because and I want to have you back on down the road, and we can go pretty in depth if you want to over the big picture movie, because a lot of people were asking that, but I want a few of you guys on. I want to get Mike and maybe an artist and then yourself. It'll probably be like 5 or 6 people. It'll be a complete shit show when it comes to it, as far as like trying to make sure everybody's not talking over each other. But I think it would be phenomenal. And I want to kind of do it. We tried to do it with our Christmas special watch along. However, too much of the audio got picked up, and YouTube flagged it for copyright right off the bat. So there is a phenomenal episode that I cannot release because it was flagged because of audio being picked up. You can show anything you want visually, you just can't pick up any audio because the algorithm picks it up right away. So we're going to try. I got to figure out how I can do that, whether I release it on YouTube or I just post it on all the social media sites so people can just see it. But I want to do that with the big picture show. So I'm not asking those questions specifically because I want to save them for that episode at a later date. Oh shit, I had that question and I lost it. It was right here. But yeah, oh yeah, there you go. When you sit back and think about everything you've done with Edit and Eddy, right? We've sat down, we've talked the characters that you like, the characters that were hard, the characters that were fun, the characters that you would like to see spin off, like Doctor Strange Plank. What is the first thought? Now, you said family earlier, right? When you sit down, if you never did anything other than Edit and Eddy, right, would you feel like you said everything you wanted to say with the Ed Boys? Or do you feel like you've got more to say? Obviously, it's Danny's property and everything like that. It's Danny's story. But do you feel like you said everything you could say? Or do you still have more stories?
I mean, me personally, I feel like I think we covered so much ground with the Eds. We really went into like a lot of different places with them, like not just like different locations and stuff, but like all the different dynamics of their friendship and things. So and by the time we hit the end of season 5, season 6, it was getting difficult to like it was becoming a Simpsons did it situation of like we were kind of going over old ground, or does that idea feel like what we did in season 3, or like that kind of thing. So at least at that time it did kind of feel like we'd really kind of scrape the barrel to an inch of its life of like what we could do with the characters at that point. You never say never. That's what I would say to that one. Because they are great, they are very complex characters, and that, and the amount of love that the show still gets. Like the nicest people in the world are like that I've spoken to have been Ed and Eddy fans. You know what I mean? It's just I don't know, I just feel like the show's got a certain heart that like you don't always get, you know what I mean? It's kind of a rare thing. So yeah, who knows? That's all I would say to that one. I'm not alluding to anything, by the way. I'm just
No, I always like to bring that one up because there are some people that feel like they could have told another story, just make it a little bit deeper, whether it's with or with some of the side characters or the supporting role characters. This has been a fun fucking talk. I'm so glad Mike and John have told me to reach out to you, because this has been a blast. The last 2 interviews I've had specifically between you and Shiran, it was fun as hell, right? So thank you for coming on. Where can people go to see what Rachel's up to next? Whether you got some stuff coming down the road or you're working on something that you can be promoting, where can they come and say, hey, I liked what you did?
Yeah, for sure. You can find me on Twitter. I'm Rachel Luckett, and you can find me. I've got a Facebook page for any writing news that I post. We've got Lucketopia.com, sorry. That's going to be, we're in the process of updating that, but that's where you can find a lot of my husband's work. And we're going to be posting a lot of the stuff that we are going to be collaborating on in future. I'm going to be talking about my novel series that I'm working on, Lionclad. And you can find, I wrote a comic. I worked on my friend's comic, Luna the Vampire, and you can get copies of that on Amazon. And yeah, so I tend to post most of my news to social media anyway. So and I'm going to be setting up a newsletter soon. So yeah, the best probably updates of where to find me would be on Twitter or Facebook.
Beautiful. And I wrote that Luna the Vampire down so I can order as soon as we get off this call. Rachel, thank you so much, man. This has been fun. That's been Rachel. I've been Julian. This has been another piece of your childhood. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.